Welcome to the 2021 St. Louis Literary Awards at Sheldon Hall, honoring Zadie Smith. This event is proudly presented by St. Louis University and HEC Media.
Good evening, everyone. I love that moment of silence when I walk out the door because nobody knows what's supposed to happen at that point. So thank you for taking a seat. So good evening and welcome. On behalf of St. Louis University, I would like to officially welcome our in-person, socially distanced, and limited audience here at the Sheldon Concert Hall in St. Louis, Missouri. I would also like to wish a virtual welcome to our online audience from various locations from around the world. And in fact, virtual audience, if I have a cat filter on my face, I am live, it is me. The in-person audience can verify for me. Yes? Okay, all right. But if I had a cat filter, that would be cool. Kind of hope it's there. The annual awards ceremony is a community event that was sparked more than 50 years ago into fruition by SLU President Father Paul Reinert and a group of civic-minded citizens who shared a passion for literature, the St. Louis community, and above all, for supporting St. Louis University and its world-class libraries, which include our main library, Pius XII, the Medical Center Library, the Vincent C. Immel Law Library, and our Madrid campus library. So tonight, on behalf of the St. Louis University Libraries and the Library Associates, we are so honored to welcome the 2021 St. Louis Literary Award recipient, Zadie Smith, right here in this beautiful venue. We have a terrific evening ahead with musical performance by St. Louis Music Box and a theatrical performance by the amazing actress, director, playwright, and program director of the St. Louis University Theater Department, Nancy Bell. Dr. Fran Pistello, the wearer of many hats at the university, including being a key member of the Literary Award programs, will be on stage tonight to let you know about some of the excellent programs that we have here at SLU. And we'll cap the evening with a discussion with Professor Smith, led by the chair of our African American Studies Department, Dr. Christopher Tinson, whose teaching and research focuses on histories of Africana radical traditions, Black protest movements, U.S. ethnic studies, incarceration, race, and sports. Chris's first book, entitled Radical Intellect, Liberator Magazine, and Black Activism in the 1960s, is published by UNC Press. For those of you joining us online, it's not too late to submit questions for the Q&A between Professor Smith and Dr. Tinson. I also want to thank Tara, Annalise, Claire, and Nate backstage, who will be screening those questions, the Dream Screen Team way back there. Now, lastly, we're back at it tomorrow with part 2 of the Literary Award ceremony, and that would be the Author Craft Talk. This discussion will be tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. Central Time, at the St. Louis University campus at the Chaffetz School of Business, featuring Professor Smith and Dr. Rachel Greenwald Smith, Associate Professor of English at SLU, and a marvelous writer herself. Rachel's newest book is On Compromise, Art, Politics, and the Fate of an American Ideal, put out by Grey Wolf Press, and it is a fabulous book. So, I say let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome St. Louis Music Box to the stage.
Good evening. We are St. Louis Music Box, and this is Show Me the Way by John Batiste featuring Zadie Smith. If I don't know, if I don't know, if I don't know, you gotta show me the way. Oh, show me the way. If I don't know, if I don't know, if I don't know, you gotta show me the way. Oh, show me the way. I've been digging in the Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, and John Jonathan McReynolds. Talk about getting it on. I wanna say, come on. I wanna listen in the Wu-Tang Clan. Wanna drive down to the New Dance Band. Stevie Wonder on the way home. I gotta say, come on. I need you.
Do you wanna come around?
You.
I really wanna get down.
You.
Do you wanna come around?
I really wanna get down, baby. If I don't know, if I don't know, if I don't know, you gotta show me the way. How, show me the way. If I don't know, if I don't know, if I don't know, you gotta show me the way. How, show me the way. I wanna feel a little Hubert Laws and Thelonious on the phone with us, vibing on Nina Simone. I gotta say, come on, come on.
I really do.
I wanna hold your hand, little darling, lover man. Beatles are Rolling Stone. I gotta say, come on, I need you.
Do you wanna come around?
You.
I really wanna get down.
You.
Do you wanna come around? I really wanna get down.
Hey. I need you.
Do you wanna come around?
You.
I really wanna get down.
You.
Do you wanna come around?
I really wanna get down, baby. If I don't know, if I don't know, if I don't know, you gotta show me the way. Show me the way. If I don't know, if I don't know, if I don't know, you gotta show me the way. Andy Stevens, Janet Evra, Tim Moore, Will Buchanan, and I'm Anita Jackson. Thank you.
Good evening. Ooh, good evening. Welcome. We're so happy you're here. It's great to be here in person. As Ted said, I'm Dr. Frances Pistello. I do wear a number of hats at St. Louis University, but tonight I'm mostly here representing the President's office. President Pistello would have liked to have been here, but he's on his first trip, traveling back from DC, and couldn't make it back in time for tonight's program. I'm also a faculty member in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I have the privilege of teaching undergraduates every semester and mentoring some of them in their research. As I said, we're excited to be here live and in person. It's been a long 18 months. SLU is 203 years old this month. It is the oldest university west of the Mississippi and the longest continuously operating institution in the St. Louis region, along with St. Louis University High. A lot is going on SLU's campus, in and around SLU's campus. There's a lot of development in the Prospect Yards area of Midtown Manhattan, so come down and visit and see all that is going on. When COVID-19 hit the world in the spring of 2020, the future was uncertain, not only at SLU, but around the world. SLU had to close for a period of time, as almost everybody did, sent students home, didn't know what the future would be. Under President Postello's leadership, we came together under the One SLU initiative and created a successful plan to allow maximum flexibility for students, faculty, and staff to navigate their education, but staying true to SLU's educational mission. We managed to get through. 50% of classes were in person. A lot of them were hybrid. Some of them were entirely online. We never had to suspend classes, as many of our peer institutions did, for a part of the year or for the entire academic year. This year, I'm happy to say, we're back entirely safe face-to-face. We are still masked, as the city requires. We're 97% vaccinated. We continue to have low transmission rates on campus, and we have enrolled our second largest incoming class. The year of the pandemic, 2019, was the largest class we admitted. It's also the most diverse class, most first-generation college students. By pretty much any measure, SLU has navigated the pandemic successfully through collaboration, sacrifice, and hard work. We're here tonight to celebrate literature and good writing, and the Library Associates were one of the first groups that invited me to join them when I came to St. Louis in 2014. It is one of the signature programs for SLU. It's in its 55th year, awarding its 54th award. Even in the pandemic, we managed to pull off a virtual award ceremony honoring Michael Chabon, with St. Louis native John Hamm being the interviewer in the program. The Literary Award is really a unique literary award because it honors all kinds of writing and writers, from poets to musical theater, fiction writers to nonfiction. It began as a singular event in Pius Library, I think on a Sunday afternoon, but over the years it has grown to celebrate a living author's body of work that connects to the mission of the university. It includes numerous programs. As Ted said, the craft talk will be tomorrow. The School of Law has a book group that selects a work of the Literary Award author and investigates that, and the Literature and Medicine program in the School of Medicine. Most recently, the university selects one of the honored author's works for its campus read, actually in collaboration with the author. The campus read is made available to campus through the auspices and generosity of the Office of Student Development and the Provost's office. And this year, the campus read is Zadie Smith's Grand Union. Under Ted Iver's leadership, the Literary Award program has added arts performances. We've just seen one. And it's now my privilege to invite Nancy Bell, Professor Nancy Bell, to the stage. She has a long association with the Literary Award, Library Associates and the Literary Award, and she will introduce the next piece of the program, which is a dramatic reading from Grand Union. Please help me welcome Nancy to the stage. Thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoy the program.
I'm here. Thank you, Fran. Good evening, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be a small part of this celebration tonight, honoring the great Zadie Smith. Tonight, we chose a story called Parents' Morning Epiphany, and it takes the form of a parent's reaction to a worksheet that has been given to them by their fourth grader school about what they are teaching their child about writing fiction. Parents' Morning Epiphany. 1. Welcome to the Narrative Techniques worksheet. 2. Feel free to take this worksheet home and review it with your child. 3, let's get going. Narrative writers use techniques such as 1, dialogue. The illustration underneath on the children's worksheet is a blank speech bubble. Nothing in it, just empty space. And yet, in this matter, the worksheet is surely correct. These days, it's best to say nothing. 2, revealing actions. Here we have 3 sets of stick figures, all with big bellies. They are racially ambivalent, although one stick figure in each set has curly hair. Nobody has genitals, but one figure in each pairing has long hair, so come to your own conclusions. In the first set, let's say that the male, the one with the short curly hair, is pushing over the long-haired girl. Stick figures are not by their nature expressive, but she looks traumatized. In the second illustration, she has given her attacker a balloon. It's not clear why. Maybe to apologize for being the victim. They're both smiling. In the third iteration, they're hugging. Much has been revealed, but much remains unspoken. 3, multiple points of view. A girl looks through a magnifying glass. Next to her, a boy looks through a magnifying glass. Next to him, a cat looks through a magnifying glass. This apparently exhausts the question of perspective. 4, first-person narrator. A boy, looking mightily pleased with himself, holds a pencil bigger than his own head. Out of his actual head come 3 separate speech bubbles: I and me and my. Well, exactly. 5, inner thinking. Very curious, it's the blank speech bubble again, but this time, instead of its own emptiness being described by a nice, smooth line, now the line is crinkled and fluffy, like a cloud. Is what we think somehow more crinkly and fluffy than what we dare to say out loud? Or more dreamlike? Or more empty? The worksheet, intended as it is for 4th graders, avoids these secondary questions. 6, description. A painting rests upon an easel. A paintbrush is suspended in air near the easel, but not in anybody's hand. The picture itself is a realistic pastoral scene, a little house with smoke rising from the chimney, a field, a tree, the moon. In the worksheet, is the worksheet implying that description can and should only concern itself with the visible? That the work of description is to reinscribe the real? That the real, as it is conceived by the artist, should be, by definition, picturesque or pastoral? What kind of worksheet is this? 7, use transitions. A clock shows the time. It is a featureless clock with only hands, no numbers, but the time looks to be about 10 past 4. I do not believe there's a hidden meaning in that. Around the clock are some helpful suggestions. A little later, after that, the following day, next. Turn over the worksheet. Okay. Narrative writers aim toward goals, such as 1, set up the problem. A car is speeding toward a cliff edge. The cliff edge is icy. It is midwinter. There is also a random tree branch sticking out halfway down the side of the icy cliff. An exclamation mark is written into the sky itself. You have to hand it to the worksheet. That's a hell of a setup. 2, introduce the characters. Small stick kid with what looks like bantu knots and glasses. Tall stick woman with Lana Del Rey haircut. Tiny baby stick figure crying with a single curl springing from head. Old stick figure with grandmotherly hair tied in a bun, walking with a cane. Arrows point to all of them as if to say, look at all these characters. But perhaps there are other ways to do this beyond the worksheets can? 3, show the character's motivation. The Bantu-headed kid, glasses gone, is holding a gift-wrapped present. In his innermost thoughts, represented within a cloud-like bubble, he is dreaming of giving his gift to the girl with the Lana Del Rey haircut. And this, the classic love story, is indeed the motivation for many a narrative writer, and yet how can I confess to the worksheet that it has never interested me in the least? 4. Stir empathy. Stir empathy. Here is a bowl on which is written empathy. The bowl appears to be filled with a thick, dark, swirly liquid like melted chocolate. It is stirred by a spoon with a heart on it. Stir empathy. An aesthetic principle or an ethical one? Or both? Hard to say. But on the main point, there can be no argument. To stir empathy is the aim and purpose of all stories, everywhere, always. How can you doubt it? It's written right there in black and white on the worksheet. 5, create the setting. Oh, the easel is back with the same painting and the suspended brush. The New York Public School Board turns out to be a very insistent proponent of literary realism. 6, show the resolution. The car is gone. The man is out of the car, and he's standing on the edge of the ice-covered cliff, clearly relieved, stick hand to his stick head, just saying, phew. Don't ask me how that happened. Plot is not my strong point. 7, draw in your reader. A recognizable human boy with sneakers and hair and actual legs lies on his belly upon the floor, reading delightedly from a book, lost in it completely. Oh, I remember that feeling. 8, clarity of ideas. A magnifying glass. Just that. No one's holding it and nothing's being magnified. It's like some kind of Zen koan. It may have gone over my head. 9, I made revisions with my goals in mind. It's a notepad being worked over by a pencil, but the absence of a human figure suggests to me that the worksheet knows full well, but daren't tell the children, that the goal never truly comes before the revision, but is created precisely by the revision itself. 10, the theme is woven through the story. It's the same notepad, but now the pencil is a needle and thread, and the word it's sewing into the pad is theme. I can imagine 100 years from now, this worksheet being found in the flooded wreckage of what was once New York, and a small religious sect forming around its precepts, and this penultimate instruction being the holiest tenet of its faith. 11, clearly move through time. A boy is running. Behind him it says, speed things up. A turtle passes him, heading in the opposite direction. Behind her, it says, slow things down. Well, that's the whole trick of the thing right there. Thank you.
Before I make any more remarks, I want to give a shout out to our student design group, Tidy Projects, who not only designed your program tonight, but they've done all of our marketing throughout the year for the last several years. And it's really a remarkable group of student artists and led by graphic design teacher Martin Brief. So I just wanted to acknowledge them. They're really fantastic. And I email them so many times a day that I feel like I've got to do something. So this kind of acknowledgement and dinner and whatever else it's going to take. The best part of my job is getting to introduce the magnificent writers who come here annually to accept the St. Louis Literary Award. I mean, check out that list of award recipients on your programs or online, because the names have such resonance, doesn't it? Tennessee Williams, Margaret Atwood, Joan Didion, Chinua Achebe, Mario Vargas Llosa, Saul Bellow, Joyce Carol Oates, Seamus Haney, Tom Wolfe, Edwidge Danticat, Stephen Sondheim, Arthur Miller, and so many more. Speaking on behalf of our St. Louis Literary Awards Selection Committee, composed of members of the SLU faculty and the St. Louis community, the St. Louis University Campus Read Committee, our Alumni Development Department, the Office of the Provost, and of course, the St. Louis University Libraries. We're so pleased that all of you here and online could be here to exalt in the kind of art that we've been celebrating for more than half a century, the art of writing. The distinct challenge both last year, when we honored the great 2020 Literary Award winner, Michael Chabon, in virtual programs taking place in 2021, we really had to move way ahead last April. And the challenge this year, as we honor the remarkable Zadie Smith to a socially distanced audience, and in just 5 months, one of the most influential and significant writers on the international scene, India's Arundhati Roy, she'll be here next April, is of course that we're navigating all of this during a globally devastating pandemic. The pandemic also reminds us, perhaps more than ever, about the value and relevance of art and literature that value is incalculable, even when the world suddenly feels unpredictable, chaotic, and frightening. To lose yourself in the world of a book, the chorus of a song, the sound and imagery of a poem, the feel of clay spinning between your hands, capturing a one-of-a-kind moment with a camera helped many of us stay grounded and appreciative of all the arts do to feed our creativity, our intellect, and our humanity. Zadie Smith is the author of the novels The Autograph Man, N.W., On Beauty, Swing Time, and of course, the book that launched, if not 1,000 ships, then a writing career that seems powered by 1,000 rockets with the release of White Teeth a little more than 20 years ago. Time magazine ranked the book as one of the 100 best English language novels from 1923 to 2005, and BBC News listed White Teeth as one of the 100 most influential novels. Now, mind you, this groundbreaking book that thematically covered so much from the immigrant experience, social class, race, religion, ethnicity, the complexity of family and friendships. All of this from a young woman who started writing this exceptional novel in college. So creative writing majors, take heart. I could spend the evening listing the accolades that Professor Smith has racked up over her career, but I won't. While many believe that Zadie Smith is one of the best contemporary novelists in the world today, she's also a brilliant essayist. Her 3 collections of essays include Changing My Mind, Feel Free, and most recently, The Sparkling Intimations, written at the beginning of the pandemic and released just months into it. The essays strike so many different emotional chords about the author's journey into a world that has been turned upside down and really shines a white-hot light onto our country's healthcare, economic, and social systems. While Professor Smith's personal experiences may have been different than yours and mine, this collection of essays feels remarkably relatable. In 2019, Zadie Smith released a collection of short stories called Grand Union, which, as Dr. Postello just mentioned, is what our Campus Read Selection Committee, made up of faculty, staff, and students, representing nearly 20 departments around both our St. Louis and Madrid campuses, decided that that would be the Campus Read book for 2021. The 10 short stories cover an incredible array of beautifully drawn characters and storylines that leave us readers feeling like we've been on the ultimate thrill ride of emotions. Now, this unique ability that Zadie Smith shares with many of the world's most accomplished writers, which is on full display throughout Grand Union and in Intimations, is to create the conduit to our emotional consciousness, the zeitgeist of our times. Part of the St. Louis Literary Award mission statement reads, "The St. Louis Literary Award recognizes a living writer with a substantial body of work that has enriched our literary heritage by deepening our insight into the human condition and by expanding the scope of our compassion." In a relatively short amount of time, Zadie Smith has most certainly created a significant amount of important work and has deeply impacted the literary and the cultural landscape. The stories and essays Professor Smith has crafted for more than 2 decades most definitely expands our compassion and empathy as we get immersed in the worlds that she creates and the unique and engaging characters to whom we grow so attached. We're so honored to have Zadie Smith fly here from London to join us tonight and tomorrow afternoon. I would like to bring her out right now, and please welcome me in joining together to welcome Zadie Smith as our 2021 St. Louis Literary Award recipient.
Hi, how are you doing? I have written a little thing. Thank you, first of all, that was so beautiful. I was going to say it's very strange to be here, but of course it's pretty strange to be anywhere right now. But for me, the idea of being the recipient of anything is always strange. I have an irremovable sense of myself as striving towards something always out of reach. But to be the recipient of something is to have reached and grasped. And I think of Joan Didion as having grasped something, of California, for example, or Chinua Achebe grasping the whole of Africa in his hands. But between my hands, all I ever find is air. All the words just run through my fingers until it's time to get to my desk and start again. I don't know why this is, but I suspect a lot of writers feel this way. Even Didion, maybe even the great Achebe. For readers, writing is cumulative. They have a shelf of my books, say. But to me, all there is process, and it never ends, never is finally reached, and never entirely grasped. But nothing moves me more than the thought that an award gathers me in fellowship with my beloved community, writers, some living, some dead. So many people on this list have meant the world to me, have actually made me one way or another. So you've given me such a gift tonight to make it possible for me to say, if only in St. Louis, Louis? Well, we'll talk about it later, that Chinua is my brother and Joan is my sister. So I thank you for that honor, and I know when I get back to the endless process, back to my desk, I'll permit myself a prideful thought. I'll think of this night in St. Louis and it'll spur me on. So thank you. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
You're very far away.
I know.
There you go.
Social distance.
Yeah, okay.
Can we have another round of applause, please, for Zadie? Just to think all that beautiful prose that you just gave us was basically written backstage. So, testament to your remarkable gifts and talents and all that, and I'm honored to be here with you. Dr. Tenson from SLU's African American Studies Department, and welcome to this year's Literary Award. Happy to be here. We're all adjusting to pandemic life. You were probably more productive than many of us in publishing a book and several projects underway. But how are you doing? How are you adjusting to things? How are you?
I mean, I really didn't respond well. It's not like I did know people who were active, who were out giving food to neighbors or joining protests, and I genuinely was comatose with depression, just laying around doing nothing at all, and full of self-pity about things not done. You know, I guess I kind of like an engine that moves forward, and the fact that everything suddenly stopped was for me completely intolerable. Like I was angry about it. Does anyone remember that petty feeling? Like there was a lot of petty anger, like, but I was meant to go to a party on Tuesday, whatever it was. It was really childlike. there was a lot of that, and then quite a lot of comatoseness, and then writing Imitations was just a way of getting myself together. I was really having a hard time getting myself together and feeling in any way useful. So it was such a great writing experience because I really felt useful, which I don't often feel.
Mm-hmm. You say in that book that writing is something to do.
Right.
And of course we know it is something to do, but it's much more than that. And we're trying to do more when we write. You feel that you're bringing people closer together in the world? I mean, we're in the world of separation and polarization, but is writing your attempt to bring us to a similar table?
I think it's more selfish than that. Now that I'm older and I look at the books in a line, particularly the one I'm writing now, I think it's much more like a child trying to fix two things together, trying to work out, how did this come to be? And the case of me, the historical processes that came to pass for me to be are very long and complicated, and in many ways very painful. I actually think that's true of everyone, even if it doesn't look like it in your face. There is no way that you aren't the result of complicated historical processes. But in my case, it's obvious, and it was always a question in my mind, like how did this come to pass? So when I'm writing, it's not that I'm trying to unite two different things, because that suggests eliding them, which is not what interests me. I'm genuinely interested in this relationship, obviously between, at the most childlike level, my mother and father, but also Africa and Europe, which I am the direct consequence of.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we've had to confront is the increasing polarization of our world, politically, socially, economically. And I'm wondering if, enmity, if you believe enmity has kind of taken over empathy as the kind of description of the human condition at this moment.
I mean, it's banality to say that, anger is on the rise, but then I'm also aware that, we were just talking about your work backstage, that in revolutionary moments, anger has to exist. Like, revolutions don't happen in calm moments, but there are always casualties too. Like the 60s is this incredible, to me, explosion of revolutionary energy and anger, but it is also a radiant time of false ideologies, bad thinking, crazed sex cults in the California hills. There's always things that seem to be part of the moment, like the idea that LSD is a great thing for everyone, which turned out a few years later, maybe not. So it's always, that's how it is. It's a mixed reality, a revolution, and the excesses of it. I mean, revolution means excess, and right now there's an excess of anger, and so that is, for someone like me, for whom anger does not come naturally, or not that kind of, I'm always struck by second thoughts. Second thoughts create something different from anger, like more anxiety and confusion. So again, when I'm writing, I'm just trying to unpack those feelings, but I don't denigrate anger. I'm just aware that different people respond differently to situations, and my response is often more agonized than angry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of the joys of being at home, even though I know I have coworkers and the president of the university is here, and I spent a lot of time watching TV.
I know. It was wonderful, wasn't it? I miss those days.
And one of the shows, one of the delights of being kind of stuck at home was watching certain shows. And one of the shows that I wanted to get your opinion on was Small Axe, the Stephen McQueen piece, which I don't know if people know, but takes place in a place that you're very familiar with, and kind of brings to life the kind of Black British culture lifestyle of the 1950s and 60s. What's your
I have a kind of complicated. I think Steve McQueen is a genius, and I've thought that for a long time. But that TV show, it's really hard to explain. Maybe in America it's hard to explain, but I understand that it would seem to be about working class Black people from whom I come. But I can tell you, in England, they were not the people watching the show. And when I kept on trying to force my mother to watch these episodes, she'd watch them and she'd be like, it's so boring, it's so long. And so it was a kind of interesting, like even the ones which were about, like the Lovers Rock episode is literally, that was her adolescence. That's what she did every weekend. And she couldn't watch it, you know. So I thought a lot about this like melancholy position of the black intellectual, right? And then the even more complex situation where you're a black intellectual on public television trying to create, in public television you have to create things that are heavily plotted. That's what we used to on the BBC. It's not that my mother can't deal with artwork. Of course she can, but BBC shows like that, we have a certain structural expectation of them. They work in a certain way. And my feeling about Steve is that he has zero interest in plot. Like, he can't even hide his complete disinterest in plot. He loves images. Like, he's the most extraordinary visual director I've ever, the most extraordinary British director I've ever seen. I think he's absolutely amazing. But I think those films are not about what they seem to be about. I think they're about much smaller things, like the beauty in a certain face, pieces of clothing, music, but the actual plots of them, I felt he was bored by them himself. I don't think he's a plotting director. I think he's an avant-garde director, a black avant-garde director, which is, for me, a great and noble thing. But for me, those TV shows, I love Lovers Rock. That was my favorite of all of them because plot didn't really matter. It was just sensuous. It was music. It was dance. It was the costumes. That was my favorite. Right. Whereas the more kind of conventionally plotted ones, I thought, he's just a greater director than that. He needs hours. He needs freedom, like that incredible episode where someone just plays the guitar, a really unpleasant song for almost 9.5 minutes. Right. Can you imagine what a British TV audience is doing? They're like, oh my God. But I was so amused by it. I was like, yes, you do that on British television. That's amazing. But it was a weird fit. That's what I would say.
Well, the music of it is something that people have been raving about as well.
Right, the music, fantastic. Everything sensuous in those episodes was brilliant. Like the films. The films are like sensory overload. But BBC One is not the right place for an artistic genius, in my view.
You listen to music when you write?
No, never. No, I think if you love music, it's impossible. Or at least the way I write, if you want to put it in that kind of diasporic tradition, it has rhythm. So I can't have my rhythm and Kendrick's rhythm or Billie Holiday. I can't have those things happening simultaneously. So I listen to brown noise and that's it. Yeah.
So I wanted to think about, you know, one of the reasons why I was thinking about Small Axe, the show you love.
Yeah, I do. There's bits of it I do love, but yeah.
Is because of a story that that you wrote, Kelso,
right?
Deconstructed.
Yeah.
And what's going on there in terms of, you know, the death of a black man in the 1950s in London, and the way in which Small Axe captures the kind of urban rebellion
it's absolutely
piece.
The same scene, yeah.
And that kind of connected to your writing,
right.
That particular story in a particular way, which also connects to the diaspora and what we're dealing with in the United States, obviously, and here in St. Louis. And I was just interested in that thread and the way in which that's a kind of continuous, unfortunate kind of thread that we have to confront in diaspora. And so on one hand, the film Small Axe contains an abundance of joy, but it's also dealing with some very, very difficult and troubling times as well.
Right. And I mean, that is the kind of background I grew up in. Like, I was aware, in fact, my mother recently wrote a novel, a good novel that was just published, and that goes a little bit earlier into the misery that generation experienced. So she's, before you get to Kelso, we're talking about the moment in the Caribbean where people start to leave. And what's not often told, and which my mother, I think, does so well in this novel, is that in the Windrush part of the story is that lots of, you know, lovely, optimistic Jamaicans come over on a boat to work, but they left children. They left so many children, and my mother was one of those children. And there was a whole generation whose mothers went to become like my grandmother, orderly in a hospital, or bus drivers or whatever, but they didn't take their children, or they took a few children, or not all of the children, depending on what could be afforded, and you were left with grandparents. And that is a massively traumatizing matter. And then those kids came over later in their late teens, as my mother did, into those kind of, Ladbroke Grove is, 10 minutes from where we grew up in Willesden. It's kind of down the hill. When they got into those environments, there's a kind of, there's the disappointment of their parents, but there's something even more frightening for those teenagers, I think. They come into streets which were like aggressively violent towards them and completely alienating. And they had this alienation from their parents. It's like a real cluster disaster. That it really interests me. And then what was built on top of it, like my generation, some of the optimism and joy in McQueen, though his experience is very different because he detested school and was one of the kids sidelined, as a lot of black boys were of that generation in schools. But there is a more positive story in those London schools in which, unlike America as I understand it, they were fairly well funded. There was a lot of them. The schools were very, very racially mixed. They were very, very class mixed. And lives began to be possible. Like a lot of what I'm writing about is, to me, a kind of now halcyon age between 1945 and, say, 1980, when the British state was really trying to function for more citizens than it had ever functioned before.
All right. So I wanted to turn over and switch to teaching. And we were having a good conversation backstage about the classroom and the challenge of that. What brings you most joy about teaching? And as one as accomplished as you are, do you struggle with trying to avoid, holding your students to similar standards that you hold yourself to as a highly productive artist?
I think that's like when we're talking backstage about how I get impatient sometimes, and I think I should quit soon because it's bad to be an impatient teacher. But I think the big difference is when I first started, I was really too young, and I didn't have any model of writing apart from my own idea of natural writing. Because I think it is true that you can be a natural writer, but I don't think that means you're necessarily a good writer, if that makes any sense. There's a few natural writers of certain felicity, but to write a good book takes more than natural ability. You need taste and self-control and lots of things, and vice versa. You can be not a natural writer and become a very great one through persistence and concentration and focus. And so the older I've got, the more I've noticed that sometimes I have natural writers of the kind I think I probably was when I was young, but they will make lots of mistakes as I make lots of mistakes. Sometimes it can be worse because the felicity is a bad habit. Whereas the writers who start at a much more, rigid place or less unsure, sometimes they're exactly the ones who go on to write really great things. So that's something you learn over time, that it's not, whatever talent is, it's such a tiny thing, and it's not that useful a lot of the time. And what's so much more useful is just the dedication, practice, time. So I now, when I have my students, I have them at all different ages. I see there's all different ways of developing, and, it's more of a pastoral sense, whereas when I started, I just didn't have any model of the pastoral. Like in Britain, there's no friendships between professors and students. I didn't think I even knew my professor's first name. It's a very distant thing.
That's excellent. I think one of the things you're touching on is the process of revision as a part of the writing process, and a lot of students struggle with that understanding that you have to revise it.
But it was an attitude I realized, like with singing, I had the same thing. Like I can sing, but because I couldn't sing like Stevie Wonder, I was like, well, forget this. That was my first. I couldn't understand that there are other, not everybody has to be Stevie Wonder. Right. Like there are many different singers in the world, and it even doesn't. Perfection in singing can be a pain, right? Like sometimes you hear somebody sing and everything's perfect, and it doesn't do anything to you. Has no emotional effect whatsoever. Writing is like that too. It's not about perfection.
So I want to add a couple of questions that we were sent, and mix those in and get your response to those. One says, "Hi, I teach high school English. What advice could I pass along to you for my high school students about writing, and what books would you recommend for high school?"
For high school kids, I think it's really important not to underestimate high school kids. I remember in in our school, you know, it wasn't a good school, I guess. It was a very kind of rough, rumble, mixed school. But the curriculum was, you know, set by the state and strict and unchangeable. So we did Antony and Cleopatra for our GCSE. And I remember thinking, how is this going to work, you know? But it was amazing. It was amazing. It just needs a teacher who is able to express what's in this text. The first thing might be very basic, you know, just to literally translate line by line what's being said. But then there's nothing in these plays that can't be grasped and conceived. And it was amazing watching this very mixed group of students, you know, like the posh kids, the middle-class kids, the really very poor kids, all able to take this material and debate it. They were interested in the relationship, in this late-life dramatic affair between two people who should know better. Every teenager knows that. They get that. So I don't... Obviously, it's important to give kids material in the American sense that they relate to, as you like to say. That is vital. But to presume you know what kids will relate to is a presumption too far. You never know. And they might surprise you. So for me, the most important thing is a great variety of texts. Historically, in terms of identities, a variety. You want to know literature, which is huge, which has so many tributaries running into it. And it's so exciting to know that that variety exists.
Another question says, how does the intersectionality of your various identities influence your writing?
I try not to apply to my most personal being secondary academic language. So I don't think of myself as an intersectional being, and I don't apply that kind of theory to my life. I know in the neighborhood I lived in that there was every kind of what you would call intersection, mix of class, race, and I know that as a lived experience, and I'm profoundly interested in it. But I don't, you know, my job as a writer, I have to use my own language. That's my job. My job is to find an intimate language for experience, for reality, not to accept secondary language over my being. So, and over my community, because language really matters. And one of the things about American cultural life, as wonderful it is that it can also be very imperialist. It takes its ideas and likes to spread them throughout the world. But the world is local and particular. Things are very different in every different place, and it's important to know that. So all the bits of my identity, how do I feel about them? They fascinate me. That's how I would put it. I love them. And I'm endlessly curious. But I'm also endlessly curious about everybody. It all interests me. And every little, just even coming into town here and realizing this is a world. Here is a world. I can't even imagine it. I can't imagine it. I can't imagine Detroit. I couldn't imagine New York till I was there. I couldn't imagine Senegal. You go and you see this completely alternate reality. You might as well be on Mars for the completely different conception of life that's in every house, in every village, in every place around the world. That's what interests me. It's not at all what you think. It's so ulterior. So I try never to use a language to map the whole thing.
So another question we were sent says, you said if I read a book, I always take something from it. What are your favorite things that you've taken from a book?
I mean, a lot of times it sounds silly, but it's punctuation. It's different writers punctuate so differently, and you learn so much about how to control a sentence and how to move things along. I mean, certain books are fundamental. So for me, Middlemarch, The Bluest Eye, just because I read them when I was young, and they construct your world somehow. And maybe because I was very young, The Color Purple, it's a very heavy book to read when you're 7 or 8. I don't know, I just took it off my mother's shelf. And I remember, more than anything, the first-person voice, which is very unusual in British fiction. People don't often, now it's become everybody writes the first person all the time, but I had not really had that feeling of someone talking in my ear as if they were right there. I was used to this more, omniscient, godlike view. And that really struck me. And even then I thought there's something in America that I want to see. If they can write like this, in this, so intimately. I was very interested in that, because I hadn't really seen that before.
Mm. You said that you don't like to be bullied in your reading by submitting to things like top 10 lists that insist on specific books to be read.
No. No, I don't.
Right. And so the question continues. It says, however, White Teeth is one of your novels that has appeared on such a list.
Right.
And so what do you say about that, the appearance of your...
I love recommendations. Like when I was in New York, my favorite thing at the end of a week was to go out with a load of writers and artists and say, what are you reading? Or what are you looking at? Or what are you watching? Or I love to have things recommended to me. I just hate to be instructed. Probably because, I went to a college where the reading list is 300 books from 600 years of literary history. You read them in order. And it's a lot, it's a lot of required reading. So I think when I came out, I thought I don't want to be required to read anything. So, I'm proud that White Teeth appears in that way. But the thing which means most to me with White Teeth is that young people read it. To me, it's like a book for teenagers. It's written by practically a teenager, and it has a kind of young person's outlook. And I like the idea of it being a young person's book, because the young people books that meant something to me, like Color Purple or The Buddha of Suburbia or Early Salinger, those books mean so much when you read them when you're 15. And I love to think that I had added to that tradition, what you would call YA now, I guess. I would like to be there because I know how important those books are.
Mm-hmm. Family is an important concept, and it's just important in general.
Yes, it is.
In your newest essay collection, From Intimations, you include a list of debts and lessons, owed to and learned from important people. Your entries include your younger brothers, Ben and Luke, who were both successful artists themselves.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up in a creative household?
I just don't think we thought of it that way. I mean, our parents were, at war, so it's a very sad household in a way, but I think sometimes when parents are at war, kids bind together. And I was the oldest, my brothers are younger, so I just remember it wasn't so much creative as authoritarian, because I would force them to participate in things they didn't want to do, like, let's remake this entire musical, or let's redo this comedy show, or so they were unwilling participants in things that I did. And then I became aware that they were, when they started getting into hip-hop, that something separate was happening. And I was like, what about me? And it was like a kind of strange revenge, like they kind of branched off and did their own thing. And then, in fact, years later, my middle brother wrote this TV show which became quite popular in England. It was like a kid's show, ran like 7 series, and the plot was this mum, they're living in what you would call the projects, a council estate. She has 2 boys, and the older one used to be a rapper, and now he's kind of aged out, and he's a teacher, but he's teaching in his younger brother's school. And then the show is punctuated with like kids' hip-hop songs all the way through. And I watched the first episode, I was like, it's the brother and the brother, oh. It's like, wait, what? And so I'd been like finally written out entirely of the whole show. I was like, oh, well, okay then. But so it's interesting. I think the thing in common, it's words, isn't it? So they write continually, but it's songs or comedy, but there was definitely a lot of talk, between us.
So what are you listening to now? What's What
I'm
motivates you?
old. I listen to nostalgic 90s hip hop a lot.
Nothing wrong with that.
I listen to a lot of that, and then I feel guilty about it, and I try and keep up with things, and then I go back and listen to 90s hip hop some more. But it depends. I listened to Dave. That I don't know if anyone's heard that. He's a British rapper friend, kind of Stormzy related, but much more much more elaborate songs. Very hard to explain. But he has a second album out, which is incredible. And so I keep up, but at 46, it's very hard to keep up. Yeah.
Now, I keep going back to music because I think that there's an amazing lyricism, I feel, in your writing. And so I'm always thinking about the relationship between those two for you. And so thinking about 90s hip-hop, which that's my era too.
Right.
Do you think about that era as influencing your voice on the page?
Yeah, I mean, but all diasporic music, just even beats. The most important thing to me in prose is rhythm, and I'm not an essentialist. I don't really believe there's some magical black rhythm that passes through all black people in our culture, but I do believe in the diaspora. I believe in history, and there is something deep in this tradition of rhythm. And even, the most, when I got older and started thinking about West Africa and visiting and learning about Yoruba and realizing that you have a culture made out of proverbs, that it's actually passed back and forth and it's like a legal fiction that comes out of people's mouths and is the text. I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's the idea of the griot, of this being like music and language and law and history, and it comes out of your mouth. I mean, so everybody, I'm sure a million PhDs have written on the subject, but it was new to me, the idea that there was this incredible continuity. And then the African-American writing that I loved is so rhythmic. I mean, Baldwin is like overly rhythmic. It's like almost like dancing or something. So sometimes I'm working to the rhythm. Sometimes I'm trying to control it because I do think sometimes the problem with rhythm is it goes down too easy, right? It's too smooth. And you know about certain kind of, I love soul music, but soul music that's too smooth? Anyone know what I'm talking about? It's just too much. No?
Please say more.
Particularly in the 90s, my mother used to call it black wedding music. There's a kind of like super soulful music that we were always listening to, which is it's just too soulful. I want to sometimes strip it back and get something like the spirit of punk, in there too. Something a little more sharp. I don't want it to go down too smooth. But that's also part of the tradition, going back and forth.
Wedding music, Etta James.
Yeah, but like Luther Vandross, Alexander O'Neill. I love all those songs.
Okay.
Or that song, Dance with My Father Again. Do you remember that song that makes you cry every time you hear it in a cab? You're like, oh God, stop playing. So that kind of stuff, I love it, but I'm always aware of the joys of felicity and rhythm, but also it's the dangers, Sometimes not everything should be smooth and lovely. Life isn't smooth and lovely. So sometimes you have to put a few sharp elbows in.
There's some questions that are coming in. This one says, I always teach Zadie's essay, Fascinated to Presume, from the New York Book Review. Nowadays, my students seem afraid to write across identity lines sometimes. Do you experience that? What do you tell them? What do you tell your students?
What I think is that I dislike the power hierarchy in the concept. I dislike the idea that no one ever said to me, well, you've appropriated this old white man in On Beauty. Because the idea is I can't take his identity, right? I don't have enough power. No one's going to say to me, you've taken this white man's identity, you've put on his clothes, you've put on his shoes, because that's not how this works. I'm the one. I'm the vulnerable one. He's never vulnerable. So I've been writing about white people forever, but nobody ever said, oh, please don't take my identity, because I supposedly don't have the power to do that. But I do. turns out I can write all these people, and I will. So it's the repetition of the power hierarchy. It's meant well, but always insisting that my identity is an incredibly fragile thing that can be stolen at any moment, but Dave's is impervious. Doesn't matter how many times you write about Dave, nothing will happen to Dave. Well, I resent that. I resent that implication. So I quite like trying to damage Dave if I can, though I don't seem to be able to. But this is not an appropriate thought for any other civic life. You can't think like this when you're on the podium, when you're at the ballot box. But in the world of the imagination, then yes, I believe I can reverse these hierarchies with my pen. I do believe that, yes. I do try.
Mm. And that seems to connect to that idea of revolution in some way that you were talking about earlier.
I think I just demand the same imaginative freedom as Dave. That's how I feel about it.
Mm-hmm. I love the roll call that you give in the Debts and Lessons section, and so I wanted to throw out some names and have you respond to each of the names that I throw out. Is that cool?
Okay, go.
Aretha Franklin.
Aretha Franklin is, she's just a master. I find that kind of thing quite oppressive, the idea of pure genius, untouchable. Aretha Franklin, to me, is something that's untouchable. Like it's a voice that cannot be bettered. Hmm. So I love examples like that, but they're also quite frightening for all of us who try and make things, because it's like a kind of high mountain peak somewhere. But I also think in her case, it just seems a definition of nature. Sometimes when she's singing, it sounds like screaming or laughing, or it's just like an emanation that comes out of her. So I kind of hold models like that, and there's models like that in literature too, as like the peak of the mountain, and try, instead of letting them depress you, like it's inspiration. It's just wonderful that it exists. It's like a gift from God.
Toni Morrison.
Well, Toni, I've just spent 3 months writing an introduction. She wrote one short story. It's the only short story she ever wrote, which is being republished in February. So I wrote this. I meant to write a tiny little introduction for her, this masterpiece story, and instead, the introduction's practically longer than the story now, which is a shameful state of affairs. But so she's been on my mind a lot. This story is an extraordinary story. It's about 2 little girls, one black, one white, in a state institution somewhere on the East Coast. But throughout the whole story, you never know which one's black and which one's white. They grow up, they get married, they have kids, you never know. And she called it an experiment in removing all racial codes from a story about 2 girls for whom race is vital. So it's about, to me, I think of her as a radical black humanist in that she does not believe in race as an essential quality, but she knows it is a structural reality. Mm-hmm. This story is that. It's a way, which you could only do in fiction, of saying both things at the same time. This is a fiction, and yet this is a structural reality. It has consequences. And those 2 thoughts make most people's brain explode, right? Because if you're telling me my race is a fiction, then why have I suffered? Or if you're telling me my race is a fiction, then why do I have this privilege? Like, it makes people's brain explode. But in the story, it's possible. And it's like one of the miracles of fiction is that when we talk about language like intersectionality or academic language, there are things that academic language can do, but there are things that it can't do. And there are things that only fictional language can do, which is say 2 or 3 or 4 things simultaneously. Mm-hmm. This kind of shimmering, contradictory space. You can't do that in academic language. So Toni Morrison, to me, is a different way of thinking. For me, more liberating way of thinking, because it deals with impossible ideas, the kind of ideas that in our civic and legal and academic lives we find we can't say or don't know how to say.
Another Toni that people probably don't talk about a lot is Toni Cade Bambara.
Oh, yeah.
And Toni Cade appears in your work.
I love Toni Cade.
And I was just interested because she's kind of an ancestral mother for me.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about how you came to her work and what her work helps you see in terms of the work that literature should do in the world?
I mean, with all respect to Toni Morrison, Toni Cade is a good example of how random literary reputations are. And I think, to be honest, Morrison might have said that too. I think they're as good as each other. It's random. Sometimes it's luck and historical placing and good fortune. Luckily, they were good friends, so there's a very funny postcard that my friend Aminatu showed me. I don't know where she got it from. She had a photograph of it where it's Toni Cade writes to Toni Morrison saying, "To the rich Toni from the poor Toni." So they knew the deal, and Morrison certainly tried to help her, a lot, publication-wise. Yeah. But these things go how they go. But it is absolutely it's not evidence of a difference in quality.
Sure.
And as far as the fiction goes, I think Toni Cade Bambara is Morrison's equal. I don't know why she's not her publishing equal. Publishing reputations are fickle, but to me, they are equal writers.
And what does she offer you in terms of just a social vision or?
Just vitality. Like, there's plenty of political argument and idea in her fiction, but that's not at the center. The center is life. She's just absolutely determined to show human life in all its complexity, even when it's not pretty. She's very funny as well. The language, her ear, like Morrison has an amazing ear, but maybe Toni Cade is even sharper, in terms of colloquial language, conversation. And certainly as Morrison got older, she got much more academic and a little very serious, because you win the Nobel Prize is a bit of a serious matter, so you have to be serious, whereas Toni Cade didn't have to be serious, so there's a lot more fun in those stories, I think.
Are there writers that you've grown to love or have fallen out of love with? Question from the audience.
I mean, there are writers, people like Nabokov, I was obsessed with, who I don't read that much anymore, just because, I don't know, you can read your way through someone. And sometimes certain writers give you bad habits. And I think Nabokov, in all his high style, is someone who gives me, he's a bad habit for me. Like, he's like an over-rich cake. So I don't read him very often. I'm reading again Tolstoy's short stories, which seem to me even greater than I thought of them when I was young. Like, it's just something like absolute clarity, like moral clarity and wisdom. It's very old-fashioned quality, but they're wise, I feel like a human being when I'm reading Tolstoy, and that he knows I'm a human being, and he knows that we're all human beings, and that's a very powerful feeling.
Can you talk about just the difference for you between your voice in essay style versus what you're trying to do in your fiction? I'm always curious about that switch of the mind that writers have to perhaps undertake. I want to know what your process was for that.
I mean, in essays, like that essay on Morrison, like what I'm trying to write about is what do I really think about the category of race? Like, what do I really think about it? What do I believe about it? So it's an argument. And when you write an essay, it's not that I don't believe in the argument. I believe it, I'm making it. But in every argument that I ever make, I have but. Some part of me is always like, yeah, that's true, but also these 15 other things are true. But the essay that included that would never end, right? At a certain point, you have to stop and lay your argument out. Like, I guess that ambivalence or doubt or uncertainty is something that fiction allows, It's not dogmatic in the same way. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm trying to experience something. So the two kind of work off each other. Like, I wrote that long essay about race, its essential nature or its structural nature, and now I'm in a novel in which these questions, it's 1850 anyway, the novel I'm writing about, and the black and white people running around in it don't have access to these arguments. And so it's a completely different experience. It's just, you have to let go of your wonk head and just let people live.
Another question from the viewers. You've noted that Bret Easton Ellis, author of Less Than Zero and American Psycho, is one of the better American novelists. What other authors do you view favorably or look up to?
I mean, there's so many that I like. I like a lot of the younger ones. There's Yaa Gyasi, who wrote Homegoing and Transcendent Kingdom more recently, who I really think is kind of amazing. I just finished Elizabeth Strout's new book, and they're like spiritual experiences, those books. I don't know how many more she's going to write. I hope there's more, but they're so beautiful. I still love DeLillo. He's still out there somewhere. But almost everything that comes through my door, I'm kind of curious. Like, there's a lot of new writing that interests me. The American novel for me is just freedom from European constriction, you know? All kinds of things happen in it. It's badly behaved a lot of the time, certainly foul-mouthed a lot of the time. And I just like all that. I like the variety of it. Yeah, it all interests me.
Excellent. This one says, is there a line, lyric, or even a singular word that haunts you in your writing?
There are words that reappear all the time. Separately is one of them. Always misspelt every time, in every copy edit, everywhere. I don't know why separately is such a word. Particular I use all the time. I notice that they're all kind of defining words, separately, particular. They're not very clubbable. They're not very communal. They're not very allied. They're very, you know, they don't know what they say about me. I'm not loving that these are the words that I get stuck on. But yeah, particular... I like words like luminous and sacred. Words that reappear, I notice I have to start taking them out because they turn up too often. I used to have a lot of stray lyrics in my head, hip-hop lyrics, and I used to put them in books, and then they cost money. And I stopped doing that, which is a really sad thing. Like, I think it's so wrong that there should be this intertextuality between music and writing. It seems so natural to me. But like 2 lines of Nas will cost you 30 grand, so no thank you. It's ridiculous.
You couldn't get your clearances?
Can't get them cleared. So that doesn't happen anymore. Yeah.
But they stay in your head, though.
They stay in my head, but in On Beauty, I think I had a load of real lyrics in, and then one edition went to press, and then I had to pay for them because I'd made that mistake. And then my brother rewrote, you know, Biggie lyrics into something else, and he just rewrote them all for me. I don't think I even credited him with that, but he did do that. Thanks, Ben. Yeah.
What is your favorite Biggie song, since we mentioned Biggie? Oh,
you know, it's not anything sensible or unusual. Like, just Juicy will always make me so happy if I hear it, or I don't have, like, rarefied music taste. I just like what everybody likes, but with Biggie, like, did you see that documentary? Yeah, that really, it was really moving, and there's a bit in it where I didn't know this, because I always wondered about why his patterns of the way he speaks are so unusual. I knew he was Jamaican, but that doesn't really explain it. Like, he cuts lines off in weird places, and the explanation, I mean, it's teleological, but given by the documentaries, he lived next door to this very good jazz drummer, and then they put the jazz drum over his lyric, and you could see, well, that's what it is. Yeah, the rhythm goes in this, and that to me was like revelation. It's like the new Gospel of St. Paul or something. But maybe everyone knew it, but I thought that was really fascinating. Yeah.
You and 4 dinner guests that are alive.
Oh, God, I hate these things.
I know you hate lists, but I had to ask, and I hope to be invited. You don't have to. It's all good.
I think I would probably take Shakespeare, Virginia Woolf, Baldwin, Tupac. Just he's be so nice to look at across the table. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting.
Yeah, it would be an interesting.
conversation.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, they probably. Yeah, it would be a strange conversation, but I just like to. It's just dead people I'd always wanted to meet. That's what that would mean to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for being you, and thank you for your amazing gift that you continue to share with us.
Thank you very
Round
much.
of applause for our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zadie Smith, Chris Tinson, all the performers and speakers tonight, and thank you for being here. Consider becoming a library associate because these kinds of programs are all the much better when you're part of them. And we've got programming that is free and open to the public all year long. So thank you so much. We're going to do it again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central Time at the Anheuser-Busch Auditorium in the Chaffetz School of Business on the SLU campus. And then come on back on April 28th, where we are celebrating India's Arundhati Roy. She is going to be here, and we're going to have all kinds of programming in the second semester. So thank you so much for being here. What a great night.